Okay, today we're looking at lesson 3-7 on page 78, dividing decimals. How can you divide using a decimal divisor? Now we have a decimal dividend and a decimal divisor on the outside. So Michelle purchases several bottles of water before taxes added. The total cost is $3.60 and the cost of each bottle is $1.20. How many bottles did she buy? So we're trying to figure out how many $1.20 are 20 cents are in $3.60. So they give you a little visual down here. 360 or 3 6/10 divided by 120. So here's 1.2 or 1 2/10, or really if you want to think of it as 12 tenths and then 12 more tenths and then 12 more tenths. Okay. The first step is to estimate. So instead of 360 divided by 120, think of 4 divided by 1. And then you know that it's going to be around 4. So, just like in the last lesson, you set this up, $3.60 or 3.60 divided by 1.20. And the rule stays the same. We cannot divide by a decimal. So our divisor cannot be a decimal out here. So we have to make it a whole number. And they want you to think of a power of 10. That will make the divisor 120 a whole number. So what can we multiply 120 by? 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. To move the decimal 2 places. Well, that would be 100 because 100 has 2 zeros. And that would move our decimal 2 places here. And remember, we would have to do the same to the dividend in the box, and it would move 2 places here. If we're going to multiply 120 by 100, we have to multiply 360 by 100, or we're going to change the whole problem. So once you get that set up, then you're actually going to be working this problem right here, 360 divided by 120. Okay, so now you're going to go ahead and work the division problem. And if you think about it without the 0 on each of these, we actually have 12 being divided into 36. You can think of it that way instead of 120 being divided into 360. And 12 will go into 36 3 times. So 120 will go into 360 3 whole times, and it would be left with a 0 remainder. So you don't have to add your decimal and keep on going. So the answer is 3, that she bought 3 bottles of water, which is close to the estimate. Okay, let's look at another example on page 78. How can you divide a decimal by a decimal? And they want you to find 0.021 divided by 0.35. So again, okay, so it's this number divided by this number. This number, the first number, goes in the box. So down here it shows you it would be 21 thousandths divided by 35 hundredths. We cannot divide by a decimal, so they show that we need to multiply 35 hundredths by 100 to move the decimal place 2 places to the right. And if we do that to 35 hundredths, we have to do that to 21 thousandths, so we move the decimal 2 places to the right. Oops, I moved it a little bit too far. Okay, so 2 places to the right, which would make it right there in between the 2 and the 1. So your new problem becomes 2.1 divided by 35. Okay, so it becomes 2.1 divided by 35 over here. And 35 cannot go into 2, so they have a 0 there. Remember, they always bring the decimal up in division. And 35 cannot go into 21, so there's another 0 above the 1. Make sure you're lining up your numbers. And now they're looking at, well, in order to continue and actually solve this problem, you have to, what they call, annex a 0. So they add a 0 here. And Now they find, well, how many times does 35 go into 210? And if you work it out, you'll find it's 6 times, and 6 times 35 is actually 210. That leaves you with a 0 remainder. So the problem, if it says 21 thousandths divided by 35 hundredths, the answer is 6 hundredths. Okay, look at number 1. In the guided practice on page 78, it's 2 divided by 0.5 or 5/10. So they want to know how many 5/10 are in 2. So you set up this problem here, and we can see that, well, we're dividing by a decimal, which is not okay. We have to multiply by a power of 10. So I know I would need to move my decimal place 1 place. So I would be multiplying by actually just 10 this time. And so I need to do the same thing over here. Remember, it's 2 is a whole number, so my decimal would be right there. And I'll have to add a 0 so that I can move it over here. So my problem becomes now 20 divided by 5. And we all know 5 won't go into 2, but it will go into 24 times, which is 20 and 0 remainder. Oops, hope you paused me here. Look at the next problem and pause it and try it. Number 2, the question is, or the problem is 1.25 divided by 0.25. So we want to set this up. 1.25 is in the box. 25 hundredths is outside of the box. And again, we cannot divide by a decimal. So we have to move the decimal 2 places this time. So we're actually multiplying by 100, or 10 to the 2nd power. So we must do the same thing to our dividend. Move it 2 places, and our decimal will end up being all the way on the right, making it a whole number also. So what we end up having is 125 divided by 25. Well, how many 25s are in? We know it's not going to work on 1 or 12, but it will work on a 125. How many times will 25 go into that? Well, 4 would make it 100, so we know it's going to be 5. 5 times 25 is 125, which leaves me with a 0 remainder. Okay, for your homework, finish problems 3 and 4. Work it out, show every step, and come to class with, you guessed it, a question for me tomorrow. See you tomorrow.